Well, we do find ourselves in Hebrews chapter 11. And today, in this chapter of the great men and women of faith, this faith chapter, we find ourselves facing a man by the name of Moses. You probably recognize his name and probably recognize a lot of things that he has done. And we see again that this man lived his life not in a way of just doing, and having salvation or righteousness applied to him just because he did a lot of things. We do see a man whose righteousness is applied to him because of his faith. And really, when we talk about Moses, he is one of the ones that we really think about where the law can really be applied to him, right? You talk about a man that wrote the Pentateuch. You talk about a man that had a lot of gifts and a lot of background that got him to the point where he could be just this tremendous leader, this man that just did a whole lot with his life. And the reason, and because he's done a whole lot with his life, there's a lot written about him. And quite frankly, he got to write a lot about himself as he wrote a part of the Old Testament, first 5 books of the Bible, all written by him. And so we have these Old Testament people to illustrate faith. And God has always done that. So as we started with a man by the name of Abel, and we saw how to live a life of faith. We saw then from Enoch how to walk by faith. We looked at Noah and said that we saw a man that showed work by faith. And then we saw Abraham, and that was a pattern of faith. And then we saw the victory of faith in the face of death from Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. And remember, they're all promised something, and it says that they were looking forward to that promise, and the promise never came while they were here on this earth. And so they passed that faith on to the next generations because their faith was so strong, and they looked forward to that with such great hope in that faith that they were able to just pass it along to the next generation. Holiness, by the way, when we take a look at Moses, we are going to see holiness in his life. And holiness, I'm going to tell you, is really a matter of a bunch of decisions that we make. And I will tell you, when I preached at a commencement before, a high school graduation, I got to give the commencement of that graduating class. And my whole thing that I talked about at the commencement was simply decisions. Your whole life is a bunch of decisions, and you're going to have the freedom of choice to make one decision or the other. And later on in life, as you get older, you're going to find out that you were either happy with the decisions that you made, and God is happy with the decisions that you made, or you're going to wish that you could go back and change some decisions that you made, won't you? Life is built that way, and I will tell you, your holiness is based off of those decisions that you make. Carnality is nothing more than making wrong decisions. Satan will tempt. Satan is going to tempt. And if you choose to allow Satan's temptations to run your life, you will live a life of carnality. Your answer will be yes to Satan all the time. There's going to be opportunities to do things for God, and your answer can be yes or no. If you know that God is moving you in a direction, God is telling you to do something, you will have a choice to say yes or no. You read the Bible, you see what the Bible says. Your answers to those things can be yes or they can be no. Adam had a choice to make. Adam made the wrong decision. The Bible tells us, by the way, because I know people say, well, if I were Adam, I would have never ate of that fruit. It would have never happened we'd all still be just living in the Garden of Eden and everything would be great. I wouldn't be a sinner. I would get to walk around the garden with God. I wouldn't have to pick weeds, which right now I find myself picking a lot of weeds in my gardens. And out front, I got these bushes that keep growing and I don't want them to grow. And so I got to keep spraying them with Roundup. Or I mow them over with my lawn tractor and then the belt comes off and makes me mad. So we have this world that we live in, and it's thankful to Adam, right? And I just simply would not have done that. Well, unfortunately, the Bible says you would have done the same thing. Whether that exact same circumstance came around and you did it that way, or you did it some other way, you would have eventually eaten of that fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. We all live in that now. Deuteronomy 30:19 says, I call heaven and earth to record this day against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore, choose life, that both thou and thy seed may live. Adam had a choice to make. You have a choice to make too. Each and every day. Joshua 24:15. And if it seem evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this day whom you will serve. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. What a tremendous verse. I've seen those verses up in people's houses. That's a tremendous verse to hang in your house. 1 Corinthians 18:21. Elijah is on Mount Carmel and he says, How long halt ye between two opinions? If the Lord be God, follow him. If Baal, follow him. And the people answered him, Not a word. Some people want to follow Baal. Some people want to follow Satan. Some people want to follow God. And I will tell you, if you follow God, if you're a believer, things are going to be much easier for you. So Abel chose God's way, a more excellent sacrifice. His brother didn't. Enoch chose God's way to walk with God. The rest of the world didn't. Noah chose God's way to obey God and do what God said. The rest of the world drowned. Abraham chose God's way to live a life of faith. Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph chose God's way to believe God for what they could not see. An illustration, by the way, of that playing out is in Nehemiah. Nehemiah 10:28 says this, And the rest of the people, the priests, the Levites, the porters, the singers, the Nethinians, and all they who had separated themselves from the people of the lands unto the law of God. So it says, first of all, they separated themselves from the people of the land unto the law of God. Then it says their wives, their sons, their daughters, everyone having knowledge and having understanding, they did cleave to their brethren, their nobles, and entered into a curse and into an oath. They swore to walk in God's law, which was given by Moses, the servant of God, to observe and do all the commandments of the Lord, our Lord, and his ordinances and his statutes. That's making the right choice. Swearing to obey God. And by the way, a revival happened. It was all part of making the right choices. And then, by the way, Josiah the king in 2 Kings 22:2, it says, And he did that which was right in the sight of the Lord, and turned not aside to the right hand or to the left hand. So you can choose to do what's right. People in the Old Testament did it. People in the New Testament did it. You have that ability. We don't have to fall to what Satan is trying to get us to do. Now, Moses shows us the choice that faith makes. And there's great truths in here for us to see about Moses. When you make the right choice, by the way, Satan is immediately thwarted. That should inspire you, shouldn't it? Satan's trying to have his will and his way with you. When you choose to follow God, when you choose to make the right choice, you thwart Satan. And right choices, and we're going to see this with Moses, are always based upon your faith. It has the basis of faith in it. Satan knows how to allure your flesh. Satan knows how to get you to do what's wrong. And if you, by faith, obey God, you're saying, you know what? God knows what's better. It might look good what Satan is offering. It might look right what Satan is offering. He knows how to make that feeling correct in your flesh. But we can still say no to it, and we can, by faith, trust God that He's going to take care of everything. That it's going to work out in the end for the believer. So Moses lived by faith. And so when we come to Hebrews chapter 11, we're going to kind of skip over verse 23. We're going to talk about it just quickly, but next week we'll probably get into it more. In verse 23 it says, by faith Moses, when he was born, was hid 3 months of his parents because they saw he was a proper child, and they were not afraid of the king's commandment. So, they were supposed to kill all of the male children in the country, right? If they were born, yeah. And they were trying to hide him. They were trying to keep him away. And you know what happens? It's hard to keep a child quiet for a really long time, isn't it? And so they hid him. They were trying to raise him, but they were afraid of being caught, afraid of the repercussions. It was all part of God's plan. And we'll talk more about what that means next week. But verses 24 and 25 is really where we want to find a lot of our information here for today. The first thing that faith does is faith rejects. It's going to be found in verse 24, 25, 26, 27 as we do our outline here. So the first thing that faith rejects then is the world's prestige. So if you're keeping an outline, you might do Roman numeral 1, and that might say faith rejects. And you might do like a capital A, and that would be that faith rejects the world's prestige. And that's found in verse 24. Look at what it says. By faith, Moses, when he was come to years, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. So here we go. Moses, by the way, is about 40 years old. Moses' life can be divided up into 3 40-year terms. There's a 40-year period where he's growing up in the household and living like a prince. Then there's a second 40-year period where he's across the desert, growing and learning, being developed by God. Then there's a 40-year period where he's the leader of the Israelites. And so right now, this is the first 40 years of his life. He's risen to the heights of the Egyptian society. He has been one of the Hebrew babies and one of the ones that was supposed to be killed by Pharaoh. The parents of Moses, we talked about this, their name is Amram and Jochebed. They hid him for 3 months. They built a little boat for him. You guys recognize that story, right? They put him in a river, and they floated it to where Pharaoh's daughter was down bathing. She saw the basket floating by. She opens it up. Inside is little baby Moses. She took Moses as her own son. He grows up in the society of the Egyptians. He's wealthy, and at that point in time, it is one of the wealthiest societies on the face of this earth. Marty just came back from Egypt, so I'm sure that she learned a lot about that stuff, and she can tell you all about it. It was the most advanced civilization in that part of the world. It made him a prince, by the way. Had the right to rule in the land. So if you turn to Exodus chapter 2, you're going to see some of the story here. Exodus in chapter 2. Tremendous things happen here. Genesis, Exodus. Got to get through 50 chapters of Genesis first. Exodus chapter 2. And when we go down to verse number 5, you're going to see what I just explained to you. Exodus 2, verse number 5. And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river, and her maidens walked along by the river's side, and when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. So inside that little ark is baby Moses. And when she had opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the babe wept. She had compassion on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." Now that's kind of an amazing thing, right? Pharaoh's daughter finds a Hebrew baby. What would you naturally do to that baby if you're Pharaoh's daughter?
Kill it.
Just drown the thing, right? We're trying to rid ourselves of these people because they're becoming too strong. We're afraid of the dominance that they might have over us. We're afraid of some of the repercussions of them having children, especially male children. But instead, God makes sure that she has compassion upon it. And then some amazing things happen, like it's written down here for us, and we get this great story. But you know what? If you just started telling a story, and this is the way the story was going to go, people would just say, that's just a story. That can't be real. That kind of thing can't happen. But this is how amazing God is. He works everything out for his will and his way in tremendous ways. It says, verse number 6, and when she opened it, she saw the baby, and we already read that. Verse number 7 then says, then said his sister, Miriam, to Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and call thee a nurse? Well, how does she just show up on the scene? She's watching to see what happens. She wants to make sure that the baby's safe. And you know what? God must have been working here in tremendous ways. God must have been working in the lives of the adults there and Moses' parents and Moses' sister. He must have had all this set up, and they must have had some kind of peace about this, and they sent it out there, and they hope, I believe, that Pharaoh's daughter will find it and have compassion. And so she's just on the scene because she's watching what's going on. And she says, shall I go and call thee a nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for thee? You can't nurse the child, right? It's not your baby. You don't have that ability right now. So why don't I go find one of the Hebrew women for you that probably has had their baby's life destroyed by your family to raise this child, to do that for you. Verse number 8, Pharaoh's daughter said to her, go. And the maid went and called the child's mother. How amazing is that? It's working out exactly the way God wanted it to, but it's working out beyond their wildest imaginations, I'm sure.
They're getting paid.
Well, and we're going to see that here in verse number 9, right? What happens here? And Pharaoh's daughter said unto her, take this child away and nurse it for me, and I will give thee thy wages. And the woman took the child and nursed it. So there you go. Even on top of being able to raise your own child, not having to hide it, not worried that anybody's going to kill it now, knowing that, and by the way, he's not named Moses at this point in time, is he? Don't even really know what his name is. You get to raise your child. You're going to be paid to do it, the livable wage, and now, what do you think she's going to do? Do you think she's just going to raise it and say, well, now we better not teach you about God because you're really going to be a prince, an Egyptian prince, right? We need to teach you those types of things. No. She's going to teach Moses about God. She's going to raise Moses to love God. And so in verse number 10, and when we get to verse number 9 and verse number 10, we're going to have a gap here. And it's not a short gap either. Like this isn't just a couple of days. This is like 30 years, okay? And the child grew. She brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she called his name Moses. And she said, because I drew him out of the water. So Moses grows. He learns a lot. He's taught Messianic truth. And now he's rejoined the royal court, becomes a prince of Egypt. And really the gap that we see happens between verse number 10 and verse number 11. And you know what happens during this time? Acts chapter 7 and verse 22, it says, Stephen said that Moses was exposed to all the wisdom of the Egyptians. What does that mean? He's educated now, right? He's learned with great teachers. By the way, that's probably one of the reasons why he was able to write the whole Pentateuch. Now, God could have used anybody in any way, but God used a highly educated man that was raised underneath the Egyptian system to write out the whole Pentateuch. And also, by the way, they have found all kinds of objects from there. I mean, these graves were there, and they buried all these different princes and rulers of that time. I mean, you got King Tut, which became very famous, right? And all the things that were buried with him. There's so many things that they have found, things from that they know that children played with. So Moses probably played with many things as a baby, things like tops, miniature weapons. They have mechanical toys. They found mechanical toys that are tied to a string, and when you pull them, the mechanical toys do different things. So they engineered some pretty cool things. They had pets, and Moses would have had all of those things in his upbringing, where his mother is teaching him, and then he's also learning how to read, how to write, and how to do all these things. God was preparing him for something special. And I will tell you then, God must have revealed to him at some point in time that he is going to be the ruler of Israel. Must have told him that. Must have told him that he was going to help lead them to the promised land, which means something. Remember what our heading was for this? What does faith do? It throws away the world's prestige, doesn't it? Was Moses in a place of high prestige? Oh, yeah. Prince of Egypt. Going to be a ruler. Moses was going to have to throw aside everything he had, go live with the slaves, or grab everything that the world has to offer. How many people at the age of 40 are going to throw away everything that they have, all the prestige that goes along with being a prince, and say, my people is this group of slaves, and I'm going to live with them and amongst them? Not too many people would do that, would they? I will also tell you, there's nothing wrong and there's nothing sinful about Moses being a prince. If God has called a man, a woman, to be a prince, to be a leader, to be a president or whatever, that's fine, if that's what God's called you to do. But if God has called you to be something else, and you say, no, I'm going to live my life this way, then it becomes sinful, doesn't it? Acts chapter 7 and verse 23, it says, and when he was full 40 years old, it came into his heart to visit his brethren, the children of Israel, and seeing on them suffering wrong, he defended him and avenged him that was oppressed, and smote the Egyptian, for he supposed his brethren would have understood how that God by his hand would deliver them, but they understood not. So when Moses decides to stand up for his own brethren, what happens? Now he's rejected by the Israelites too, by the Jews. Yeah. So he's going to be rejected by the Egyptians. Now he's going to be rejected by the Jews. Back into Hebrews chapter 11. With that as your background, what does it say? By faith, Moses, when he was come to years, this is verse 24, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Moses gave it all up. Moses was unwilling to just accept whatever Satan was dangling in front of him. Moses was not willing to just say, I'm just going to live this life of luxury. I'm going to take everything, and in the known world at that time, that is the greatest place to live. Tremendous things, tremendous power, tremendous wealth. He could have lived that way. But he didn't. You know, in the New Testament, there's another guy that has a pretty similar standing that Moses does. When we think of some of the greats in the Old Testament, Moses is one of the greats, isn't he? In the New Testament, there's a gentleman that God says is the greatest man born to a woman. Who is that? His name is John, isn't it? Luke chapter 1 in verse number 15 says, "For he shall be great in the sight of the Lord." This man is John. And you would say, you know what? John probably, if he's going to be great in the sight of the Lord, he's probably going to have a lot of money. Well, he doesn't. He lives in the desert. You'd say, well, maybe he had really nice clothes. Remember what kind of clothing John had? He wore camel skin. Basically, he wore a Tarzan suit. You'd say, well, maybe he's highly educated, right? He's not. Didn't have a great education at all. You know what he ate for food? Locust and honey, yeah. Now, I'm interested in a lot of food. I'll eat a lot of things. I've even had fried grasshoppers, which I'd imagine is probably close to locust. It didn't have any honey on it, though. Kind of tasted like beef jerky. A little salty. Fried. My roommate in college was from Mexico, and that's what he got for a care gift. So I had fried grasshoppers. It was okay. But you know what? If you gave me a whole plate of fried grasshoppers and a steak, I'm probably going to eat the steak, right? And most people probably don't want to eat the fried grasshoppers either. That's John. Matthew 11:11 says, "Verily I say unto you, among them that are born of women, among them that are born of women, there had not risen a greater than John the Baptist." It's a tremendous statement, isn't it? That puts him above Moses, doesn't it? Puts him above Abraham. You would say, what makes him so great? Well, number one, John was obedient. Number two, John was filled with the Spirit. Number three, he turned many of the hearts of the people of Israel to God. You know what that was all about then? It was a life of simple pleasures. He didn't have a lot. But who's going to be the greatest in eternity in heaven? Oh, John certainly is going to be one of them, isn't he? He didn't have a lot here on this earth, but he has a lot in heaven. Moses? Is Moses going to be a great man for eternity? Moses chose not the world's prestige. He gave it up. Why? Because God asked him to. You know what the second thing is? So in your notes you had A. Faith turns away from the world's prestige. Second thing it does is it says no to the world's pleasures. Verse 25 of Hebrews chapter 11. Choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. Now there's some interesting things there, right? And then this is a verse that when I was in Word of Life, teenagers, this is one of the verses that I had to memorize. Famous verse. And really I've memorized both of them. What did he do? Instead of being called the child of Pharaoh's daughter, he chose rather to suffer affliction with the people of God. Did Moses suffer affliction with the people of God? Yeah. Different times, right? Right away when he was 40, he decided to follow God. Had to go across the desert, get a lot of training. Then he came back. Was it easy on Moses when he came back and he was 80? Imagine trouncing around through the desert at 80 years old with an army following you. Wasn't easy, was it? He suffered affliction. Then to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. You know, Satan has a tremendous way of just laying stuff down on our path, doesn't he? And what is it that is easy for you to just bend over and pick up? I can tell you this much. If there's a penny laying on the ground, I just leave it. We're not going to make pennies anymore. Do you know what? This is like the last year for it. So let the penny hoarders begin. But the other day, I was in the mall. I found a quarter. I picked the quarter up. I contemplated not. But I've also seen dollar bills. We pick those up, don't we? I think that the largest thing I ever found was a $20 bill. I was out on a lake in my boat, and I looked down as I was fishing, and there was a $20 bill floating by me. I'm looking around like, who's this belong to? I'm like, guess nobody. It's mine. Pick that up, right? Satan knows how to, and there's nothing wrong with doing that, but Satan knows how to tempt you with different things in this world. And I'll tell you, it looks pleasurable. And the Bible tells us something. It says that the pleasures of sin are for a season. How long's a season? About 3 months, right? Winter feels like 6 months, but whatever the season is, it ends shortly. There is pleasure in it. And I'll tell you, if you decide to sin, you're probably going to enjoy it right away. But then I'll tell you this much. After you've pleasured yourself in that sin, whatever it is, before long, you're probably going to hate it. It's not going to be the fun that it was to begin with. And then usually it catches up to you. And then there's no pleasure in it, regardless of what the sin is. And then there's a price to be paid. And so he tells us here that Moses chose to suffer affliction with the people of God. I'm going to tell you this much. If sin comes around, choose the affliction over the pleasure. Because the pleasure is not going to last long enough to matter. It's not going to last for eternity. James 5:5 says, you have lived in pleasure on the earth and been wanton. You have nourished your hearts as in a day of slaughter. You know what that says? You're filling your hearts up with sin, and it's just like a pig that goes out and wallows around in the mud and eats all of the things. And you know what pigs do when they eat all that stuff? They get fat. How long does it take a pig to get fat? Now, I used to live in Marcellus, where the pig population, I think, is 10 times the amount of the human population. So that when the pig market went bad, like 20 years ago, it was a state of emergency in the county. Now, I'll tell you, those pigs grow fast. You know what happens after they wallow around in the mud all summer long and they eat food all summer long and they get fat? They're just ran off to the slaughter, aren't they? That's exactly what that verse says, James 5:5. You wallow around the mud, you get fat, and then comes the slaughter. It's not worth it. Don't do it. God has called us to be holy. This world is throwing all kinds of garbage in your path. It's easy to pick it up. And I'll tell you this much. Satan wants you to pick it up. He doesn't care about you. He wants you to falter and fail. He wants to fatten you up for the slaughter. He wants to devour you. If you really believe God, you'll do these two things. You'll reject the world's prestige for the honor that only God can give. You'll reject the world's pleasures for the everlasting pleasure that only God can give. Let's have a word of prayer. Our gracious Heavenly Father, we do just thank you for this lesson that you've given to us. Father, as we think of these things, as we think of Moses' life, everything at his fingertips, everything that the world wants, Moses had. He refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to suffer affliction than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. He did the right thing. He chose a life of holiness. I know he wasn't perfect. I know hardships came. I know he committed sins. But he still rejected what the world was offering. And today we know him as a man of faith because of what he did in trusting you. I pray, Lord, that as we live our lives here on this earth, that as we come to the end of our lives, people will look at us and say, that is a man, that is a woman of faith. And that that'll be based upon the lives that we chose, the decisions that we made, and that we chose to live in holiness instead of living in what this world gives. Father, now we just ask these things in your name. Amen. All right, we do have a closing song. Number 375.